My name is Ankit, Dr. Ankit Chadha, who's founder of In2Med. Some of you might have seen me before at our previous webinars. I'd just like to welcome you. It's gloomy on a Saturday morning. It's quite early, but well done for making it on time. And it just shows that you're interested in mastering the UCAT. I'd also just like to introduce our other speakers today. So we have Aya, if she wants to just turn the camera and say hi, and also Paul, who's the head of biology at Long Road Sixth Form College, who's going to be talking and introducing us to the UCAT. And then Aya is going to be giving us some tips as well on generic advice on how you can apply it. And then I'll be going through section by section of the UCAT, trying to give top tips for how you can maximize your score. So this webinar will be interactive. There'll be space for questions after each of the sessions. And also at the end, we'll do a Q&A. So if you have any questions, note them down, and then please do feel free to ask. I've been to a lot of these. I remember when I was applying, and the last thing I want you to feel is more confused than when you started. So if you have any questions at all, it's a safe space. Please do ask. None of your cameras are turned on, so no one's going to know who you are asking the question. So please don't feel embarrassed at all. So just to start, my name is Ankit. I studied medicine at the University of Cambridge. I'm now working as an FY2 doctor at Hammersmith in London. And as I said, I founded In2Med, a portal for medical students and people applying to medicine. I applied to 4 universities, which was Cambridge, UCL, King's, and Queen Mary. So 2 of those required the UCAT. And I got a score of 750 in the UCAT, which was in the top decile when I was applying. So the reason I like to cover this, or I think the UCAT is very important, is because if you look at the timeline, the application steps to get to medical school, you can see that there's all these steps. There's the personal statement, which you probably might have started writing now. Then there's the UCAT over the summer. Then there's the UCAS application, then the BMAT, the interview, and everything like that. And so when universities are looking to decide whether to give you an offer, there's actually a lot of stuff that they look at. However, if we go into this in a bit more detail, we can see that the personal statement, not all universities really look at it. And I think they know that you can get, other people to write your personal statement. Now you could even use things like ChatGPT to help. And the personal statement is a very subjective thing. The next thing is predicted grades. Now, again, they know that your teachers are probably going to be quite in favor of you, and everyone who's applying to these universities is going to meet the predicted grades. So it's more like a cutoff than a differentiator. In the past, there used to be AS levels, but those don't exist now. So all they have is your GCSEs, but that's from about a couple of years ago. So they're not the most up-to-date information. Then again, you have the teacher reference. And just like the personal statement, it's a very subjective thing. So what we found is that more and more, it's the importance of the admissions test. And by that, I'm talking about the UCAT and the BMAT. And that's what's going to decide whether you've got an interview. So they're definitely not tests to take lightly. Although the medicine application can seem very holistic because of the sheer volume of people who are applying and the competitive nature, what we are finding is that it is basically all based on your score in the admissions test, provided these things are okay. And that's going to determine whether you get an interview. So before starting this webinar, a lot of people think you cannot revise for these admissions tests. They're not testing knowledge, only aptitude, because they're designed in that way. You cannot boost your score. That's not true. A lot of people also think the exams are make or break, and that can put a lot of pressure on you. And, you can get sleepless nights and you can start panicking. But the one thing I do want you to take away from this, that if you do badly, it doesn't mean you're not going to gain admission. All universities use the UCAT in different ways. So although the aim of this webinar is to help you maximize your score and give you those top tips so that you can start preparing and smashing this exam, even if you don't hit those high numbers, it's not the end of the road. It doesn't mean your dream of becoming a doctor is over. It's more about how you use your score, and we can talk a bit about that later. So to start with, we're going to start with Paul, who's, as I said, the head of biology at Long Road Sixth Form. And he's going to tell you from a teacher perspective what it's like preparing students from the UCAT, and basically the common pitfalls that come over every year, and how you can get through this by changing your mindset now while it's early, right at the start of the summer. And then I'll see you back in about the next 10 minutes where we can cover the next aspect. So Paul, do you want to take it over?
Brilliant. Thanks, Ankit. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session this morning. So yes, the teacher's perspective is what I'm talking about. I've got students who are going for medicine again next year. And it's just really what can a teacher do? In my case, I'm alert to what students are trying to do for medicine. But maybe your teachers aren't if they're not used to people applying to medicine, and you might need to give them a few nudges and sort of point them in the right direction. I saw this cartoon last week, and I thought this really sums things up really nicely. Patient's gone to the doctor and said, "Oh, I'm constantly exhausted," and the doctor's so exhausted they've fallen asleep on the desk. So again, go into this with your eyes open. It is, I mean, ask Ankit, it's an exhausting profession. Particularly at certain times of the day, at certain times of the year, or depending what sort of rotation you're doing. It is really tough, but what we're talking about is trying to get in, and that is tough too. Okay, first slide, please, Ankit. So what's this one saying? You've got to be able to multitask, basically. So at the minute, I'm asking my students to write their personal statement. They're also practicing for the UCAT. When they come back in September, October, they've got another exam to do for me. Then they've got to get their UCAS form sent in. Then we'll have mock exams in December. And it's just kind of relentless. And you have to be able to multitask and do all these things. But that's what it's like being a doctor. Doctors have to multitask as well. So the whole process of getting into medicine is kind of really good practice for the skills and aptitudes you need for being a doctor. If you can't multitask at this stage, then you're not going to be able to multitask as a doctor. So it's just something you have to be able to do. Okay, next slide. So what I'm saying here is take control of what you can. So predicted grades, you might say, well, that's down to my teacher. Yeah, but based on the evidence you're giving them. So if you give them really good evidence that your tests this year have been really good, it's very easy for a teacher to predict you a high grade. I always say to my students, make it easy for me to predict you an A or an A star. That's what I'm trying to do, but I have to base it on evidence. Subject references from teachers, which I'll mention more again in a minute. Again, you might think, how can I influence that? Well, a teacher's writing about you. So they're thinking about you and how you've performed this year, and then they write their reference. So make sure what they're seeing of you is really, really good. So then they write a really good reference. Your personal statement, that's entirely for you to sort out. So have a really good think about that, and look online and look for information as to make it really good. UCAT BMAT prep, as Ankit's already said, this increasingly becomes the discriminator for many med schools. Someone like Bristol, they just set a very high UCAT. If you don't make it, they're really not interested. Other places like Plymouth, the UCAT's not so important to them. So take it seriously. Do the very best you can. Get the highest score you can. If things don't work out in year 13 and you take a gap year and you go again, from the experience of my own students, those who've they've done a gap year and then reapplied to medicine, every single one of them has got into medicine, partly because they've redone their UCAT and it's massively improved a year later from when they did it before. So give it your best shot you can this year. If it doesn't work out and you end up in a gap year, go again. Probably it will be a lot better. Okay, next slide. This is just a little bit of data for those of you who like numbers to crunch. Have a look at 2022. This was the number of people who applied to UCAT, and you can see just over 36,000 people took the test, which is almost a quarter increase from 2018. In terms of applying to med school places, roughly 6 candidates per place in med school. If you apply to London, it's about 10. So if you're thinking of a London university, they are way more competitive than the other ones. They said on the news last night that the government are now wanting to double the number of med school places from 7,500 to 15,000 but that's going to take about 8 years to put in place. It's not going to affect you guys, but I know that they realize we do need more doctors and there aren't enough med school places. So the numbers will go up, but that's not going to happen in the next few years. Look at the last bullet point, the average UCAT score. Now, this is taken from the UCAT website, 2,500 or 625. So that's the average score of people who took the UCAT, but then not all of them actually then went on to make an application. So it's not an average of successful applicants to medicine. It's just saying of all the people who did the UCAT, this is their average score. So is that a helpful number? Well, let's have a look at the next slide, please, Ankit. This is just from my own students at Long Road last year. We had 6 students get into medicine, which is all of the ones who tried to get in have got in. And their the lowest UCAT score was 655. The highest was 753. Now, remember, the average UCAT is 625, and you can see there that all of them are above average. So if you do the UCAT and you get average or below, you know, average doesn't mean you're going to get in. What it means is you're making it hard for yourself, actually. So, you know, if you can get 650 or above, you've got a really good chance of getting in. If you're down near the average score, it's not impossible. Places like Plymouth often go for low scores, but it is much more difficult. So really take the UCAT prep seriously. It can make a massive difference to your application. Next slide. So you can book your UCAT now. Bookings are open. You can take it until the 28th of September. Remember, you do have to book it and places do get filled up. So if you know when you want to do it, I'd say book in. You've got to give yourself about 4 weeks lead in to the UCAT, sort of 3 or 4 hours a day. So what I'm recommending to my students, let's say, is if they tell me, well, I'm around all summer, then maybe the end of August would be a good time. So you've got the whole of August to get yourself together ready for that test. What I don't recommend is doing it towards the end of September when you're back in school. People like me are asking you for homeworks and revision for tests and personal statement, and all that's going on, and you're trying to prepare for the UCAT. I wouldn't recommend that at all. So end of July, end of August would be really good times to do it. There's a ton of resources you can use. I've just listed some here. Some of them involve a cost, others don't. Have a look at them. The one that people like leading up to the UCAT is Medify. I believe it's about £10 a week. And what's good about it is you practice questions online and it gives you immediate answers. You can buy books and you just look up the answers yourself. But the good thing about Medify is it is timing you, and you do it to time, and you get a real sense of how am I doing compared to what the actual test is going to be like. So when I talk to people trying to go for medicine, Medify is the one they always say. I use that in those last 3 or 4 weeks just to practice doing the questions. Okay, next slide. Predicted grade. So this is again from my perspective. Your teacher is on your side. Your teacher wants you to do really well, and they want to predict you the best grade they can, but they have to do it based on evidence. And you might find that they've got a line manager who is checking all their predictions, and they have to then say, you know, why are you predicting the student an A when last year all they got was D's in their tests? And then you can't justify it. So give your teacher all the evidence you can to let them predict you a high grade. Next slide. I got this data. This is from Cambridge International A-level exams, but it shows the point really well. The yellow bar is the predicted grades, and you can see year on year on year, teachers over predict their students' performance. Next slide, Anke. And there we are, look, they're saying that our analysis shows predicted grades as a whole were higher than historical performance by about half a grade. So teachers are over predicting on average by about half a grade. But then they did say it's perfectly understandable as the teachers really want their students to succeed. So your teacher is on your side, and use that to your advantage, but give them the evidence. So if they said, look, we've got another test in September, do really well in it, and you're making it very easy for them to predict you the grade that you're after. Okay, next slide. So there we are. let your teacher know what a great student you are. Make yourself stand out from your peers. So, look around your classroom. Are you in the top 2 or 3 hardest working people in that class? Because that's where you need to be. When your teachers mark mock exams, probably they put all the data onto an Excel spreadsheet and rank the cohort from top to bottom. Are you in the top 5%? Are you in the top 10% of that cohort? That's what you're looking for, that you need to be a really, really high achiever, because you're demonstrating then all the attributes you need to do medicine. Okay, next slide. So doing well in exams, you're showing I have the academic ability. Taking an active part in lessons. I mean, are you really, really quiet in class and don't like to speak out in front of others, don't like to answer questions? You're not demonstrating A, that you care, or B, that you have the ability to talk in front of other people, which a doctor will need to do. You'll be dealing with strangers a lot of the time, people you're not familiar with. So you've got to practice doing that. So have a go in lessons. Go the extra mile. So do things above and beyond what the normal student will do. But tell your teachers this. If your teacher doesn't know, how can they include it in a reference for you? So anything you're doing, whether you're reading books or papers or attending lectures or doing work experience, tell your teachers, this is what I'm doing. And then they get a real sense of how seriously you're taking this. Okay, next slide. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the references are changing this year. This is the first time this has been brought in, and there's a new style of reference. And your teachers may not even know too much about this. I know where I work at Long Road, I found out about this in a meeting some months ago, but the other teachers didn't have a clue about any of this, and they've only just been told. So it's now in 3 sections. It's meant to make it easier for the teacher. This is the idea. It's meant to be a bit more targeted. So the first section is written not by your teacher, just by the school. So someone higher up in the school will write the first paragraph, and every student is going to be the same. And what they're doing is setting the tone for the school. They're not trying to sell the school. It's almost they're doing the opposite, and they're saying kind of, the students at this school have got a lot of things to deal with, like we're in a very high poverty area, or a lot of students with English as a second language, almost playing down the school to say, if a student can get an A grade in a school like this, they've done really, really well. So that's nothing you've got any control over. Okay, next slide. Second one, probably written not by a subject teacher, but by your tutor, your pastoral tutor. Anything extenuating about you. So I've just put some examples. Maybe you're a carer for a sick relative, and that takes a lot of your time. So, if you weren't doing that, you'd be an A or an A-star student, but you're more of a B grade student. But that's why. And then people get it and they think, oh, okay, that's the fact you're getting a B actually is really, really good, bearing in mind the circumstances that you're in. Second paragraph, are you the only person from your school applying to medicine? Or are you the first person for many years to apply for medicine? That needs to be mentioned, because you don't have a supportive group of peers and teachers helping you with your application. You're kind of doing this alone, and that needs to be pointed out, because that makes it much, much tougher. And the one at the bottom, just an extreme example, if you live on the Shetlands or something, you might find there's no local hospital. I can't do work experience. It's really hard. It's all online. But then it's understandable. Where I am in Cambridge, if any of my students said, I can't get work experience, I say, we didn't try hard enough, because it's out there. You're not in the middle of nowhere. There's a massive hospital just down the road. So, no excuses for my students. But for some students, that might be a real problem. So again, talk to the person who's going to write this bit, probably your tutor, and anything that you think they need to know has to go in that section. Okay, next slide. So this is the bit now written by your subject teachers, and it's all about your academic suitability and the student's achievements. So for example, this student is in the top 3% of the cohort or something. That's what they're looking for. It's not about personal characteristics, and teachers often like to write about personal characteristics. That's just going to be removed or ignored. So it's all about academic suitability. And again, you need to make sure your teachers are saying the right things about you, which are true. So what are the key messages? Next slide. So your academic ability, suitability for the course, your potential. Maybe if you're on a B now, but your student says the teacher says this student's got the potential to be an A or an A-star student. Okay, that's fine. Ability in relation to your peers. Are you in the top 5% of the cohort? Are you top of the class? So how are you doing compared to everybody else? And if they're predicting you high grades, but the evidence isn't really there, then why are you saying that as a teacher? And it might be, look, this person is a young carer, they've got an awful lot of responsibilities, they're currently on Bs, but they're 100%, they would normally get As or A stars, something like that. Okay, next slide. So what kind of evidence? Mock exams, tests, homework, anything extracurricular? Just provide your teacher with the evidence that they can do a really strong reference for you. With your personal statement, again, show it to them. They can give you feedback on it. You want as many people to look at your personal statement and comment on it as possible, really. But also, if you're saying something in your personal statement, there's no need for them to say it in the reference. Or if they've put it in the reference, there's no need for you to put it in your personal statement. It doesn't need to be too repetitive. It should sort of dovetail together really nicely. Okay, next slide. Can you see your subject reference? Yes, anything your school writes about you, you are allowed to see. So why not ask? Why not ask your tutor, can I have a look at the subject reference? And if it's something you're not happy about go and talk to the subject teacher. So do talk to your tutor about your reference. Don't just assume it's all going to go through nicely. Have a look at it if at all possible. And make sure it's really closely scrutinized, that it's saying the correct message, which are true. We're not making things up. It is true, but it's showing you at your best. Okay, next slide. This is just some things to look out for. It's more, is it a reference or a school report? So, there's no need to talk about a candidate's personality, not relevant. Why are we talking about a student's punctuality? Not relevant. Group work, verbal contribution, not really relevant. Instead of that, talk about key academic messages. Are you able to read a scientific paper and distill it into a paragraph or something? Can you collect some data and do a statistical analysis on it? Something like that. Subject reports can be based on generic qualities. So, if group work is relevant, then it can be mentioned. It doesn't have to be just things that you do on your own, because doctors work in groups. They work with these multidisciplinary teams. So yeah, group work can be in there, but it's not one of the most important things. Okay, next slide. There we are. So there's a lot to think about and a lot to do, but just stay calm and take control of everything you can take control of, and provide all the evidence your teachers need so they can give you the best predictions and the best reference they can possibly do. I'm sticking around all morning, so if you've got any more questions for me, just pop them in the chat and I'll be very happy to answer. Okay, thanks, Anke.
Our previous feedback from webinars, we really value having Paul on the call, because he could give you the perspective of a teacher. And, teachers are your friends, not foes. They're the ones who are going to write your reference, your predicted grades, and help you get into medical school. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat for the next bit. And Paul is managing the Q&A, so he'll try his best to give you the answers for those. So now that we've done some of the holistic stuff in terms of your application and understanding the importance of the admissions test, we're now going to dive into the main focus of this webinar, which is advice for the UCAT itself. So we're going to start with Aya, who's going to start some generically to give some general tips on how to book it, the importance of it, a bit more about the sections, and then I'll go into it section by section. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it over to Aya.
Thank you. So a little bit about me. Hi, everyone. I'm going into my 4th year now of medical school at the Holyoke Medical School. I'm an international student and I live in Abu Dhabi. And I did the UCAT when I was applying as well, and had a bit of experience with the application process the same way that you guys do it and are currently trying to. So hopefully I'll give you a few tips about just the general preparation leading up to the UCAT and how you can go about it to approach it well. Next slide, please. So let's start by breaking down what the UCAT actually consists of. Basically, it's about 2 hours and it's a computer-based exam that medical schools in the UK use to differentiate candidates so that they can know who they should offer places to or for the interviews. So we have 5 sections that make up the whole exam, and those are kind of outlined down here. You have the verbal reasoning section, decision making, quantitative reasoning, abstract reasoning, and situational judgment. And each of these sections will assess certain skills and kind of abilities that are considered really important for future doctors or dental students and stuff like that. And each of these sections will assess them differently and will be, you have to approach them differently, which is why we're going to talk about how you need to approach each of these sections individually in the next half an hour. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of kind of an example of what the UCAT interface will look like when you do the exam. So it would be on a normal desktop with a mouse and keyboard, and you'll have this screen viewing right there. So with the question stem on one side and the options on the other. And you have options at the top. So for example, on the right, you can flag a question for review. So you flag and come back to it later when you're done. And on the left hand side, you can see a calculator, which will look like this. And it's the calculator you're allowed to use during the exam. This calculator is quite kind of harder to use. It's much harder to use than your normal handheld one. So I would really recommend practicing using this calculator when you're practicing for your UCAT as part of your preparation, because using this calculator effectively and as little as possible will help you save time, which is the main goal when you're preparing for the UCAT, is to be time effective. You also get a scratch pad or piece of paper to help you kind of write down things as you need during your exam as well. Next slide, please. So really important things to keep in mind for the UCAT is the key dates, and these can be found on the Pearson, the UCAT website, if you Google it. These are taken from there. So what happens is currently the testing window has started, so you can apply to book your test now. And you have from the 10th of July, I think, till around September time, which is the 28th of September is the last test day. And you need to pick a day during that time and book it through the website and before the UCAS deadline, and you should get your results on the day. And the universities also get the results automatically through there, so you don't need to submit it or anything like that. There's also a bursary scheme, and those have different application deadlines, so make sure to watch out for those. Next slide, please. So the UCAT is scored based on the so you've got each subset, which each of the sections, the 4 sections are scored between 300 and 900, and then situational judgment is scored in bands. So the mean scores, for example, when you kind of add up all the 4 subsets, end up being in 22, it was about 2,500, but it varies year on year slightly. And the top decile, which is the top 10% of applicants in 2022, had a score of more than 2,880. And the better your score, the better your chances of getting kind of asked to come to an interview by any of the medical schools you apply to. Do we move on to the next slide? Yeah. So the situational judgment section is scored on bands from 1 to 4. And as you can see here, the banding scores for like the last cycle was around people who got band 1, which is the highest, was about 20% of the applicants, and so on. And in 2022, again, for each of the subsets, these are the scores listed below. And each university actually uses a different scoring system for each of these. Next slide, please. So you can see here, some universities have cutoffs for their UCAT score. So for example, Bristol will basically take you if your score is about 2,870, whereas Edinburgh will take you if your UCAT score is about 2,470, and so on. But some other universities don't have a cutoff, and instead they compare all the applicants, and if you're in the top 50% of applicants, then they take you. So it really depends on the university, and most universities will have this publicly, this information publicly available, so you can check based on your score which universities are most likely to take you and which kind of where your score fits best, essentially. So if you have a really competitive good score, you can apply to universities that really value the UCAT, for example, like Bristol, which has a really high cutoff compared to the others. Yeah, and for the situational judgment test, there's always a minimum band, and that will depend on the university. Usually it's either band 3 or 2. Next slide, please. So my advice for you when you prepare is to make sure you give yourself enough time. 6 to 8 weeks is plenty of time to give yourself to revise, and practice is essential for the UCAT. So you have to understand, be familiar with the question types themselves, each of the different 5 subsets of questions. You need to know what kind of questions come up. For example, in the quantitative reasoning section, there are certain math skills that you need to have hammered down in order to do that section and focus on. So knowing which of these skills that you need to know will help you in your preparation and be very effective with it, rather than going in blind, not knowing and having to guess on test day. So make sure you practice the official papers on the UCAT website. You have to have a revision plan structured day by day, structuring your days according to the subsections you need to focus on. You always need to be reflecting on your scores. So if you're performing really poorly on one subsection compared to the others, make sure to practice and prioritize that subsection more, because that's your weak area, and you need to have a decent score throughout the UCAT. So again, with the UCAT, repetition is key. You have to practice under timed conditions as well, because the UCAT exam is designed to be a very time-pressured exam. Most of the questions are actually very easily doable if you had a bit more time, but unfortunately you don't. You have a very limited time per question, and you need to be able to prioritize those questions, know if a question is taking too long to just flag and skip it, and practicing under time conditions will show you how you're performing under a really high pressure situation. So make sure to keep coming back to the practice papers and use the tips from people who've done it before. You're in a really good position because the UCAT has been tried, tested, done a million times by many, many different people with so many different tips. So use the resources such as this webinar, our course, to help you know the strategies to use in order to do well on it. Next slide, please. So now Dr. Chada is going to take you through the different sections.
Sure. Thank you very much, Aya. If anyone has questions for Aya, pop them in the chat and she'll try and get around to them as well. So although I've been to a lot of webinars and basically they would have covered what we cover so far in terms of giving the generic advice, the booking details, you know, a little bit of information, what the section is. One thing that we really like to do in our webinars, and hopefully you've seen this in our teaching style, is try and be as specific as possible. So for the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to dive into the UCAT section by section. Now, it's not going to be possible for me to give you the tips and strategies to confront every section or every question type in the UCAT. That would be included in our course, which takes basically over a day because there's so much information on there. In addition, the only way you're going to cement these strategies is by practicing. And we've just also launched our new question bank itself. So that's the best place. But the purpose of the next 30 minutes is basically to emphasize that you cannot just wing this exam unless you know the strategies, or you're very lucky on the day and guessing the questions correctly, you're going to get a bad score. And basically we'll cover some of the key tips in there just to show you how you can use tips and strategies to make the process much easier. So the first section in the UCAT is the verbal reasoning. Now, verbal reasoning is actually one that people might have had some experience before, for example, when doing their 11+ or their common entrance exams to secondary school. However, it is the hardest section of the UCAT, and you usually find that the scores for this one are the lowest, often in the 500s, because it's so time pressured. So it's 44 questions, and that only in 20 minutes. And that means you're only getting about 30 seconds per question. And it used to be easier because there were 2 question types. The majority was this question type called true false, where they'd give you a passage of text and then some statements and ask if they were true or false. However, as people started getting more used to that and performing better, they then came up with harder questions, which is single best answer, which is that they will give you statements and be like, which of these is most likely to be true? So you have to, instead of reading keywords, look at whole phrases, or which one weakens the argument, or which one does the passage most agree with? And that can be very difficult doing it in the time. So the way that this section works is that you get given a stem of a question. So this will be on the left side of the screen. And this is about 200 to 300 words that the answers will be in. You're not expected to know any other information. So even if this information was wrong and it started in 1963 rather than 1863, you would basically only have to use the information in this text. Now, although that seems like it makes it easier, it actually makes it harder because sometimes you might know a bit about the answer already. And so if you know it's true, you'll want to click true. But unless it's explicitly stated in the text, you can't write true. And so the answer would have to be can't tell. And getting into that mindset is hard. And then you'll get given a statement like this, like the London Underground system is the oldest underground system in the world. So if you guys just want to put in the chat what you think the answer is for this, just out of interest, I'm going to just time 20 seconds and see if anyone can pick it up. This one's one of the easiest questions, so hopefully you can get it. And while you're doing that, I'll keep posting. So if you put it in the chat rather than the Q&A, please, otherwise the Q&A gets bombarded with random letters. Okay, fine. Sure. So I think in terms of the majority, we can see that we can't, the chat is disabled. Sure. All right, no worries. We'll keep it in the Q&A. That's fine. As we can see that the majority is true. And yes, we can see that because it is direct, it's literally the second line. It is the world's oldest underground system. Now, the way to do this is that the key strategy for this is that if you try and read the whole text, you're not going to do very well, because in order to read the whole text, that will take you about 2 minutes itself. And by the time you've read it, you will have forgotten it again. So all you'll have to do when you read the question is just read the text again. And you can basically get into this vicious cycle of constantly reading text without knowing what to find. Instead, the key thing to doing well at this is identifying keywords. And that's what we try to do. So we try, obviously the keyword here is London Underground. That's what we're looking for, the subject of the sentence. And here, oldest. So that's what we want to look for. And we can see that the first paragraph, well, the whole thing is about the London Underground, but we specifically found that word oldest. If we found not before that, we know it's false. And if we couldn't find any example of the word old or a time sort of sense, we would have to be can't tell. So the way to do well in this is not just speed reading. It's first identifying keywords. Don't even look at the passage of text. Look at the question before. Try and pick the keywords out of that and then go into the text. If you do it the other way around, you'll spend 2 minutes reading this, and by the time you get to this, you'll have to start all over again. It's just wasting time. The other thing is that actually knowing the definitions of true, false, and can't tell. True means it's directly supported by the information in the text. And here we found an example of that. False, it's directly contradicted. And can't tell is everything else. So if you are guessing, I probably would guess can't tell, because it's more, if you're finding it hard to find that information, most likely it just isn't there. So you're not going to spend time wondering about it. This is what I mean. Don't spend time on these ambiguous questions. Take the hit, eliminate answers like true or false, and then go for can't tell. So we're going to do a quick one, and this is a quick bit of 4 questions. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for this. And the idea is not that you try and get 100%. It's just that you gain an appreciation for how time pressured this exam is. And again, this is on the easier type of questions. But what I want you to do is, rather than reading the whole text, just go straight to the bit in the question. Try and find the keywords and then try and find them in the text. And I'll be keeping it on the time. So you can put the answers that you get in the Q&A, and I'll bring up the answers at the end. So I'm going to time just under 30 seconds per question, then move on. Okay, that's the first one. Okay, that's the second. And last one. Okay, fine. So I just wanted to, so that's basically the time available. And this is one of the easier ones that you will see, because it is a true false can't tell. So let's just bring up the answer. So the first one is can't tell. So the increase in number of heart transplantations is due to increasing number of people. Now, this might be right. This is what I mean by you can't bring in previous knowledge. We know heart transplantation occurs twice, but there isn't any suggestion of this. And if it's there, if it's not in the text, we cannot infer it. The second one is true, because there is evidence in the text that it directly agrees with the information. The third one was also can't tell, because although it's there, again, without further information, the statement is beyond the passage. So a lot of these statements are beyond. And the instead, having Okay, so that basically is a whistle-stop tour of verbal reasoning, which is the hardest section. The next one is decision making. Now, this actually, I think, is one of the easiest to do well on. It used to be called decision analysis before, and that used to cover codes, but it's changed. And what now it is, it includes 6 question types. And this section really differentiates people who know the strategies to people who are just winging this exam. Because in this section, you are going to get 6 question types, probably not in this order, but nothing else apart from this. And so if you know the strategy for each of these question types, you will know how to do this section. There's basically no other way of saying it. And so it is quite easy to do well. It's a lot less time pressured, but you can do well. So again, I'm not going to have time to cover the strategies for every single one of these question types. That's going to be included in our course. But what I thought I'd do is just show you the value of learning the strategies by doing the first one, which is syllogisms. So in that one is, I want everyone to just have a go at this. This is an example of a syllogism. So all Europeans of African descent have dark skin. Some individuals with dark skin are vitamin D deficient. That's the information it's given you. Now, what it wants you to do is basically circle yes if the conclusion does follow, or no if you cannot. And I'm just going to give you the advice of following the advice in the verbal reasoning. Unless you can directly infer it, it's not going to be true. So do people just want to have a go at this? And, I'll just give 30 seconds for this because you don't need longer. Okay, does anyone want to put in the Q&A what they're, just put Y for yes and N for no? By the way, if people are asking questions about later sections, we are coming on to those. Okay, so we've got one, which is no, yes, no, no, yes. So the first one is no, 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 no. I like this example because all of the ones are actually no. And we'll come back to this after seeing the strategy. So for this one's, a syllogism is a type of argument where you're given several premises, often just 2, and then you need to check if a conclusion is inferred. Now, the easiest way to do this, I find, is, well, because I like maths, is actually just basically using a bit of algebra. So for example, all windows are made from glass. Now you can write W for windows or whatever, but I would basically write windows from glass. And then 2 is glass from sand. So as you can see, the way we've written this is A to B, windows from glass, and the second one is glass from sand, so B to C. Therefore, if you were doing this like algebra, if A equals B and B equals C, can you see how A kind of equals C? So the B's cancel out, and that's what you have to do in this. That would mean that conclusion is all windows are made from sand. That is realistically the only thing that you can infer from this. So if we go back, let's see. So if all Europeans of African descent have dark skin. So if we put Europeans of African descent to dark skin, and then this is different. This is not all. They're saying some individuals with dark skin are vitamin D deficient. Now, in here, the only thing that's common is dark skin. There's no mention of Europeans of African descent and vitamin D deficient here. There's no link between them. So, and what you also need to look out for this section is words like all or none, because those are absolutes. And even if one person isn't vitamin D deficient, this doesn't follow. So if this says all Europeans of African descent are vitamin D deficient, that's just not true, because they might all have dark skin, but only some with dark skin are deficient. So that's not true. Some Europeans of African descent are vitamin D deficient. So again, this is one of the hardest ones. We know that some Europeans of African descent have dark skin. And we know some people with dark skin have vitamin D deficient. However, it might be that all of the Europeans of African descent are in the subgroup of people with dark skin that are not vitamin D deficient. Do you see? It can be the case. And if that could be the case, then you cannot, it's not a conclusion that you can say with 100% confidence. There might be other people with dark skin, let's say, you know, Afro-Caribbeans with dark skin, and those are the people who are vitamin D deficient. No vitamin D deficient European has fair skin. Again, these are absolute, so it's more likely to be no. And some vitamin D deficient individuals live in Europe. No, it might be that the people don't. They're just, you know, it's the subgroup that don't. Some Europeans of African descent have fair skin. I mean, we know this is true, but again, it's not stated in the passage, so you cannot infer that conclusion. So the best way of doing it is by following the strategy and basically treating this like an absolute rule book. Unless it directly follows, you can't, and be careful of words like some or all. So again, I'm just going to leave this up for a minute. We're going to have, if you can, using that information, try and use that strategy to answer this question. So current bobtails are a type of fish. Again, we don't know. It doesn't say that. We just know that they can't swim. So no, are not a type of fish. Well, this is the same reasoning. Cool, bobtails have scales. We just know that they can't swim. Again, there's no expert. So after a while, these become quite easy. Now, here's an interesting one. It's giving you extra information. So we're accepting it. If it's a type of fish, and it can't swim, it doesn't have, well, that's correct, because if it was a fish and it could swim, it would have to have scales, because it tells you that there. And sharks can swim. There's no mention of sharks. I mean, we know sharks can swim, but this is just one that's testing people who've never done this section before. Okay, so that's basically decision making. And the key thing about this section is, as I said, you're going to have 6 types of questions, and all of them have very specific strategies. So don't go into this one cold, because, you know, they're such easy marks to get. But on the flip side, they're just even easier to lose these marks. So don't, and I can see that, you know, in the Q&A, a lot of you did put yes for the last question. You know, we know actually sharks can swim, but there's nothing in here that says that. So don't waste these easy marks. Otherwise you won't do well in this section. Okay, so moving on to quantitative reasoning. And I have less to say about this one because some people do find maths just a bit hard. And the trick for this is more strategy. Now, you're not going to be asked A-level knowledge. It's not even basically at GCSE level. There's no differentiation. There's no integration. It's very simple mental maths. But the hard thing in this is basically extracting that information from a long scenario and just knowing what equation you have to do. It's all maths. It's all multiplication, addition, subtraction, and division, just in different orders with a bit of work. And the key to this is becoming good at mental math, switching between decimals and fractions and rounding. And for this, I think it's better taught in our course because we could spend the whole time on maths. And some people will be more comfortable with arithmetic than others. But the key thing about this is if you all had an hour to do this section, you would do very well. You would basically get 100% because the maths isn't hard. It's actually very, very time intensive. And so the important thing is recognizing which questions you're going to skip and getting good at the calculator. So when you're practicing, don't use your handheld scientific calculator because you're just basically cheating yourself. In addition, whenever you bring up that calculator, you need to ask yourself, do you actually need it? Using that calculator takes a good 30, 40 seconds. And so only use it if you have to. And then the final thing is even how you use it. You can use your mouse and click the buttons, or if you're practicing, practice on a keyboard which has like the number pad, because you can type those into the calculator and you're going to save time. So the way to do this is knowing your common unit conversions, using mental math, using your whiteboard when you need to, and avoiding use of calculator. And these are the 7 types of topics that come up time and time again. Speed, distance, and time. It might seem very easy, but under time pressure, so many students get confused because distance is speed times time. Speed is distance divided by time, and time is distance divided by speed. And you just need to draw the triangle for that. But that does get quite hard. The next is percentages, ratios, and proportions. You should know that 25% is 0.25, which is 1/4, which is 5 out of 20. So all of those. The next is converting. They will give you the conversions, so that's good. But again, conversions is basically ratios. So all of these things, these 4 are all basically the same. And you want to try and get up to one, like know your times tables in about up to 13. So you should know 1/12. What is that as a decimal? What's that as a percentage? 7/12, 20ths. When it gets to harder numbers, then you can use your calculator, but anything up to 12, like a few 9ths, a few 7ths, know what they are as percentages, tables and diagrams and geometry. So just to show you again about the time pressure for this thing, you'll be expected to do this in 40 seconds. So I've started the time if people want to just put it in the chat and the Q&A, what you think the answer is. Okay, I've actually given you a few seconds over. So this one, the answer was C. And basically, again, this is a ratio because it's saying, oh, I'll go back to that $1 is equal to 69 pence. So how many dollars is this? Well, I guess the first thing that you can do is, if you find maths hard, is just realizing that the pound is stronger than the dollar. So if you have this number of dollars, you have less pounds. So if you have this number of pounds, the answer has to be more than this. So you can already cross out A and B because you know that dollars, you're going to have more dollars if you started with pounds. And even by doing that, you've increased your chances of guessing from 1/5, 20%, to 1/3, 33%. Then you just got to know which way to go. So if the correct answer, someone put it in the chat in how to do this, is that you're going to be dividing by the conversion factor here. And that's how you get up to this number. So in terms of quantitative reasoning, it is hard, but and I can't just sit here. It would get very boring if I sit here and taught you 1/12 is this, 2/12 is this. You have to do that in your own time. But the key thing is basically having a level of respect for this section. And it is actually easy to do very well in this section. If you stick to those rules, if you become very disciplined and realize if it's too hard, keep to the time and move on, you'll do very well. I got 880 in this section, and I think that's because I do enjoy maths, but more so because I was very disciplined and I learned those 7 topics that I brought up earlier in a lot of detail, and I basically barely used the calculator at all, and that's why I could do quite well in this section. Okay, so we've done 3. We're going to crack on because I know it's coming up to 11, so we're slightly behind schedule, but there's not much left. And this is my favorite section, the abstract reasoning. And I think it's just because I like shape. So this was my best section in my UCAT where I scored 890. And again, it's because I learned the strategies. And if you've never practiced the UCAT before, then you're going to find this section really hard. However, if you have done a lot of practice questions, you will find that the patterns repeat themselves quite a lot. So it is the easiest one to prepare for, and it's actually been made a little bit easier, just a little bit shorter. It's the same type per question, so you get 55 questions in total, and basically about a minute per set. Let's put it like that. So the way that this works is the majority of this is that you have two sets, one in this one and one in set B. And there is going to be a pattern which links all of these images together, and also a pattern which links all of these together. And then you're going to get given a test shape like this, and you'll be asked, which set does it fit in? Can I put this one in set A? Can I put it in B? Or does it not fit in either? Now, none should be replaced by none/both, because if you could fit the shape into both, the answer is also none. So it's important to know that. Now, does anyone know the pattern in this? Just out of interest, you can put it in the chat. So everyone's saying set A. Yeah, so it is set A. So the reason is because in set A, you can see all of these shapes have curved edges. All of this one has straight edges. And so this one has curved edges. It's going to go into set A. Well, the question is, how do we know that? How do we know to look at it? I've done, a lot of practice questions. So this jumped out at me straight away. I didn't start looking at what's in the corners and stuff. I could automatically see, it's straight and curved edges. And you want to get up to that level of familiarity in these examples. So the way we do that, and the key, and basically the only strategy which works for this is this SSSPN, which is shape, size, shade, position, number. The pattern that you are looking for has to be, or will 99% be, in one of these categories. It will either have something to do with the shape, with the overall shape. And by shape, I'm talking about characteristics of the shape. For example, like, does it have straight or curved edges? The next thing will be size. Is it big or is it small? Now, set A could just have big shapes, set B could have small shapes. Now, in this case, it's obviously not that, because they're all the same size. The next is shade. Is it colored black, gray, or white? Now, again, because here's a white shape, here's a black shape, we know that the answer is nothing to do with shade. Then it's position. Is it put in the bottom left or right? Well, they're all in the middle, so that's not a differentiator. And the last is number. Maybe this one has an odd number of shapes, but again, there's only one. So I know the answer is in shape. And within shape, I've learned all the different categories as well, the subcategories that it could be. And so this one was very easy because it just was shape, and I could do it straight away. And that's basically the strategy. As you do more, I used to have a notebook, and I basically wrote these 5 categories out, and I knew that in shape, I'm looking for stuff like edges, symmetry. In size, I'm looking for small, medium, large. Shade, it's black, gray. Position is not just corners, it's about any specific corner or position relative to another shape. And then number of edges, number of corners, number of right angles. These are things that come up very often. And it's very easy to actually scan for this in 30 seconds. What you want to do is forget about unlike verbal reasoning, is don't even look at the test shape, because you're just looking at random shapes. Look at the question here, try and find out the pattern, and then it's very easy to assign. So I'll give you a minute for this practice test, and let's see if you can get it. And you'll see, basically, if you get the pattern, it's very easy. If you don't, so the way I'm going to do it is leave the sets up for about 30 seconds, and then you can assign them after. Okay, so now we'll bring up the shape. So you got 30 seconds to match these ones up. Okay, do people want to put their answers in? Because that's about time. All right, I will start revealing them. So I'm interested to see if anyone's got the pattern in this. The answers were B, none, A, and neither. Okay, so if you're looking, if we again go through shape, well, we can go through it in reverse order this time because the answer is actually in shape. Number, well, there's nothing to do with the number of shapes. And you can waste a lot of time counting edges in this, but I'm not going to do that. Position, well, they're all basically in the middle. Shade, there's again mix, so I don't think it's to do whether it's black or white. Size, they're all quite big. So it is in shape. Now, is there anything that you can see in these? It's actually easier, and this one's a bit harder to see. In set A, all of the ones are symmetrical. You can fold these in half at some point. And even this one you can fold there. And in set B, they have no lines of symmetry. You can't fold this, you can't fold this. This one you can't fold, that's not symmetrical. So then if you know that you're looking for symmetry, it's very easy. So this one, and this isn't symmetrical, because I don't know how you're going to fold this exactly in half. If you do it that way, these don't add up. The reason this is neither is because this has got symmetry and this one's not. So remember I said if it fits in both, it actually fits in neither. This one, these are symmetrical, so A, and again, neither, because it fits in both. So the idea of this was again to show you that this one's very actually easy to learn. And there are 4 types of questions. This is the most common. And the other ones are basically all built on similar principles. It's finding patterns. But all you need to do for this section is get used to pattern spotting. And the more questions that you do, the better you're going to get. And spotting them on a screen rather than a book is obviously helpful as well. And for this one, I would even practice untimed. You're just trying to get good at spotting the pattern, and then the timing will get very quick. It's basically like learning a new language. Okay, so let's move on to the final part of this webinar, which is a situational judgment. Now, this is scored separately from the rest of this exam. This isn't going to give you your score out of 900. Instead, this is scored in bands from 1 to 4. And there's 2 types of question, whether something's appropriate or importance. Although this is the least important section of your UCAT, going further in your careers, it's actually the most important one, because time and time again for your professional exams, whether you're applying for foundation medicine or specialties, this exam is going to come up again and again. And it's actually, this one's not very time pressured, so you can chill a bit in this. You've got 22 scenarios in 26 minutes, and there's more than enough time to read the question. Here, they're not interested in whether you can skim read. It's just about the type of doctor that you're going to be. So here, you're given a scenario like this. Hassan and Steve are 2 friends in the same year at medical school. Steve is furious about the grades he got on feedback about his ability to take blood safely and professionally from patients. So they're going to say, imagine you are in Hassan's position, who's Steve's friend. How are you going to respond to this? And the 2 types of things that you can do. So this is the action that you're doing, and you're asked to rate how appropriate they are. It's on a scale of 4. It's either very appropriate, kind of appropriate, inappropriate, or very inappropriate. And even if you don't get it 100% right, if you're on the right side, like if it was very appropriate and you put mildly appropriate, you'll still get some marks. So the main thing is working out whether this is a good thing to do or a bad thing. And so in order to do that, the first thing is understanding the definitions. And for that, it's, which will come on in a second, is that if you don't even know what they're meaning by appropriate or very inappropriate, then how are you going to know what the answers are? The next thing is learning rules about key topics that come up again and again. Confidentiality, consent, patient safety, and we go into these in detail in our course. And doing this well, because this exam will come up time and time again in your medical careers. So just some quick advice to show you what we're kind of getting through is that in order for something to be very appropriate, we're trying to tick this golden triad. Is it subtle and delicate? Is it rapid? Like you're sorting out the issue right there. And is it professional? You know, so you're not starting to scream at someone. That's not very professional. And if it ticks these three, it's very appropriate. If it ticks 2 or 1, I'd say it's appropriate. If it's literally against this, then I'd say it's very inappropriate. And the inappropriate but not awful is actually not that common a response. So by using this, we can assess the appropriateness of responses. So last question that we're going to do today is this. I just want you can put VI for very appropriate or VA for appropriate A. So just see if you can do this, and you give a minute. And this is the last question we're going to cover. All right, everyone, that's basically time. So the first one, anything where you read report straight away, that's not subtle and delicate, and it's not very professional. That's very inappropriate. The next thing is staying out of the situation. That's basically letting a problem get worse. So again, it does nothing to help. So it's very inappropriate. Now, look, this gives you the keyword you've been looking for. Talk delicately with doctor. That's very appropriate. Again, telling the receptionist that everything is well. So you're dismissing concerns. Again, you're doing nothing. So that's very inappropriate. And again, looking into recent complaints, that doesn't do anything to help. But again, you're not reporting anyone. So it's not the worst thing you can do, but I'd say it is inappropriate, but not awful. Okay. So basically, that covers the sections of the UCAT. I hope you have found this useful. And I'm going to invite Aya back on now to just do some concluding remarks. That basically covers a lot of what we've gone through. There's still a little bit left. So if for the next 10 minutes, then we'll have a Q&A at the end. In this, the UCAT is a hard exam, okay? And unless you know the strategies, you're not going to do too well. I hope you found, our teaching style useful. Because it does go into and that's the level of detail that you do need to go into these courses. So I'm just going to pass over onto Aya now.
Thank you. So just to summarize everything we've covered today, the UCAT is a difficult exam that you can absolutely revise and prepare for. It is not an aptitude test on its own. Good preparation will get you good results, and it opens so many doors for you if you have a good score. It's becoming increasingly important to do well on the UCAT, and it's become the main differentiator between candidates. So make sure you do as much preparation as possible for it. And yeah, basically, a bad score does not rule out medicine, but a good score will definitely give you an advantage. And if you found this useful, we have a very special offer on our UCAT course, question bank, and our personal statement course. So you have everything you need to have a really strong application for your medical schools during the summer in preparation for next year. And I think you stopped recording, screen sharing?
Yeah.
So our UCAT course bundle is on our website, and I've put the link in the chat, so check it out. We've got the 3 courses, and as you can see, we've got the syllabus on the side. You've got video previews, really detailed course, we have everything you need to know per section, how to prepare for it, examples, practice questions, and the strategies we think you should use. Everything covered in one space where you can track your progress. And it's a really, really good course. We would highly recommend it. Then here is the question bank itself, which covers everything again you need to know. We've got mock exams as well as mini mocks, and the question bank per each of the sections as well, as you can see here.
So some of the feedback we had from previous years is that they found our course really useful, but obviously we know that you're only going to get good at this exam by practicing the questions. Therefore, as of last month, we've just launched our brand new question bank, the In2Med question bank, which has over 5,000 questions in it. And that basically, you get that now included as part of the course, which you didn't get before. And in this, we didn't just want to include mock exams or question banks. So you can start with the question bank, then do mini mocks of each of the sections under time conditions, and then move on to the mock exams. You can track all your progress. You can do it in exam mode, which is time, or just practice. And you can split up. You can do, all 588 questions if you wanted, or split these up according to how many you want to do. And there's mini mocks for each of these. You get this, we wanted to include this as part. So whereas the UCAT crash course itself is 89, as part of that now, you'll get fully included the question bank as well and the personal statement course. And we've put the link for that into the chat for you to see. And we'll also send it in a follow-up email.
Finally, if you liked our webinar and thought it was useful, we would love to hear what you thought. And if you could give us a review by scanning the QR code, we'd really appreciate it. And if you do give us a review, you'll get the recording for this webinar, and we'll email it out to everyone who does give us a review. So please make sure to do so. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you for everyone. I'm going to invite Paul back as well. Yeah, some people were asking and emailing about the recording. So yes, if you do leave us a Trustpilot review, we will give you the link to access the recording. It can take up to a week. We're going to process it and edit some bits out just to make it smooth. But if you could do that, that would be great. And do check out our course as well. Some people are asking if there is a bursary scheme for it. We do have. So if people are on like free school meals or pupil premium, just email in, and then you can be eligible for our bursary, and we'll explain more for that if you do email in. We've really enjoyed having you. You've been very engaged, leaving a lot of things in the chat. And so for the last bit, we're just going to leave this up. And if you have any questions, that can be about the course, about the question bank, or anything about the application process for the next 5 minutes or so. I know we've gone a little bit over. So I've just seen one. Someone asking how long is your course? So our course is actually quite long, but you can do it in your own time. So I'd say it would probably take a couple of at least a day if you're sitting it from 9 to 5. But I would recommend spacing out. Each section probably takes about 3-4 hours to cover the content and go through it. So the idea is to basically dedicate a weekend to this course, and then over the next 6 weeks, go through that question bank and do all the questions in there, all the mocks and all the mock exams. And by then you'll be ready for that. Cool. Thank you. Is there any other questions coming in? So someone has asked if they can buy the question bank separately. So at the question bank itself is actually, equivalent to the UCAT course. So if you were buying it separately, it would cost the same. That's why we've just bundled it in, because they go hand in hand together. So that's the promotion that's currently running. You will be able to buy it separately, but it'll basically be the same price. So is it course free for people who have free school? It's not free because there's cost in running it and building it as well. But we do have a bursary scheme. So please do email in at inquiries@In2Med and we can help facilitate that for you. Cool. Paul, can you see any questions in the chat that you want to answer?
I think I've answered all the ones that I can do so far.
Sure. Yes, I've seen this. You've been going through in text. Fine. Someone said UCAT and BMAT at the same time. No, most definitely not. They're very different exams. They test different things. We will be doing a BMAT webinar, but we'll be doing that after the summer. So we really encourage you, dedicate this summer to your UCAT, get good at it, do well in the exam, and then we'll come back towards August at the start of September where we can focus on the BMAT. There's no point trying to do them at the same time. You're not killing two birds with one stone. You're actually making things harder for yourself. Okay, I think that's almost about it. I noticed we're getting some questions on the BMAT. You don't need it for every uni, but I'm going to defer BMAT questions till after the summer for our next webinar. Cool. Yes. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for attending. You've done well to get up early on a Saturday morning. Remember, the recording will be available, so please do leave us a review. I'll post the link for that as well on a follow-up email shortly. But have a very good weekend. And yes, it's now the start of July. Unfortunately, this summer is not a holiday for you. But the good thing is if you work hard and get your offers for medical school, your summer of year 13 will be the best one of your life. And you can enjoy that knowing that you've worked very hard. Thank you very much to our speakers as well, Aya, and also Paul. It's always great to have you here and get the perspective of a teacher. And we do really value that.